This is Inspirational Women, a weekly series shining the spotlight on female trailblazers making a true difference in our community. Once again, here is Kate Daniels.
We are in the middle of Women's History Month, sharing the stories of truly amazing women. So what could be bigger than sharing one woman's story? How about 12 women's stories? That's exactly what we experienced in meeting Jenny Mitchell, who had just this exact vision: to share the voices of bold leaders in her very important book, Embracing Ambition, Empowering Women to Step Out, Be Seen, and Lead. Jenny Mitchell, good morning, and thank you so greatly for taking time to be with us this morning.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure to be here.
And I am just so enthralled with this important book that you've written, Embracing Ambition. So that's a big title. But then this is the real key part, right? Empowering women to step out, be seen, and lead. So we need this, I think, now more than ever. Very critical. The women that you showcase here, really great stories, really demonstrate so much, a really broad perspective. And so I think this really can reach a very broad audience.
I agree with you. And if I can sort of fill in the background of the motivation for the book,
I
Kate,
would love
because
that. Yes.
Yeah, it's funny, it's like there were moments where I was like, who am I to bring another book into the world, right? What is my unique opportunity, or what's my thing to share? And I will start with, your listeners don't know much about me, but I'm an academic. I grew up in an academic world. I have a piano performance degree. I loved learning. And the ultimate achievement for an academic is to write a book. And every time I thought about writing a book, I was like, blah, boring. Who wants to hear from me? I only have one perspective. And so when I started shifting my energy and saying, okay, well, if I wasn't writing a book alone, who would I write it with, and how could I make it joyful? And that's actually how I came up with the idea of inviting 11 other women CEOs to write the book with me, Kate. Isn't that fun?
It is. Oh, absolutely. And that's why it is, I guess, so dynamic and really can reach such a very broad audience.
Yeah. And I felt in this day and age, my perspective was valid for sure, but I felt like people needed to hear from other women leaders' experiences. And particularly, you'll find stories of a woman who's Muslim. You'll find a story of a woman who is a Black woman, ironically never thought of herself as Black until she came to Canada, right?
Yeah, okay.
So interesting. And all of these voices, the mandate I gave them, and we wrote them actually together, which is an interesting story. We wrote in collaboration with each other, and we supported each other through the journey. I said, I want you to share with me what it feels like to be a woman leader, not just like the textbook or the MBA stuff, but what it feels like on a personal level and a professional level, but the experience of leading with the warts and all. And I would love for you to share at the end of each chapter what you learned from the experience and what you'd like to impart. Because what I found was we can do a better job of preparing the next generation of women leaders, Kate, if we tell them what's coming or inform them of these experiences in advance, because then they at least have that knowledge. What they do with it is up to them. I knew we could do a better job. That's my motivation.
And I feel this is probably very generalized, but I still do feel that women are generally more vulnerable and honest in sharing what their experiences are, rather than wanting to have this really tough exterior. Although I think you went through a period perhaps in your own life that you felt, right, that you needed to kind of fit a certain model. But it's learning then that that's not where we go.
Yeah.
Isn't that so?
Well, it's funny. You're very intuitive. For your listeners that listen or read the book, what you're talking about is part of my story was thinking I needed to act a certain way, or I think the title of my chapter is No Right Way. I thought there was a secret magic door that if I just did that, everything would be okay. And anybody who's been in leadership knows the most important secret sauce is you. It's not the book, not the strategy, not the approach. It's really rooted in who you are. And I think a lot of us women leaders, the people I work with tend to be super smart and super compassionate. So what happens is we get to a certain level in leadership because we're faster, quicker, more experienced, we can see things. And then we hit this plateau when we step into leadership, and we have to kind of define for ourselves how we want to lead. And it might be slightly uncharted. It is uncharted for everybody. But I think for compassionate leaders, for women styles, there aren't a lot of role models, Kate. There just aren't, you know?
Yes. And that's why it's so important to share these stories. Stories are so powerful. And here, being honest, it's obvious. These are really like right from the gut, not color coding them in any way. So really, we can learn more than we are going to do in a classroom reading those big volumes of academic books.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that really was my goal, was how, and I'm a very feeler. Like if you chart me on any of the leadership things, I lead with compassion. Feeling, thinking, and doing are kind of the three buckets, but feeling being first. And I've really worked hard in my leadership style to kind of just notice it. It's a strength, but I have to stretch out my other strengths. And so the marrying in the book of the research on women's leadership, you'll see at the beginning of each section, there's a pillar of the research, which is Dr. Megan Rabine's research. She's the dean at Douglas College, which is the women's college at Rutgers. And so her dissertation was about her lived experiences of, she did her research, she compiled her dissertation. And so there are 5 pillars that anchor the book. And then within the pillar, you get some lived experience stories, which I think just brings so much color. So pillars like embodied roles. Women tend to become the role, or, it's like the cancer CEO, CEO of the American Cancer Society, who has personally experienced cancer in her family. And so the ability to disengage from the passion and the work is very hard. She becomes embodied. And it makes it very hard to turn off. To we call it perception barriers, which is the old imposter syndrome, to embracing challenge. The women in the book tend to take on things they know nothing about. This is a trait of leadership. And 2 other things I was put in the visionary category: the ability to see something that doesn't exist yet, and how you bring people along. So that research with the stories. And then the third portion is, at the end of every section, there's some reflection questions, right? And those reflection questions allow discussion and conversation to happen. And that really was the ultimate goal: was, did you experience it like this? And what did you find? I wanted to prompt those conversations.
Right. And because we might not think of those prompts, but I think having them there as in print, the questions, or if you read a digital version, but they're right there, I think confirms what we might be feeling. And like, oh yes, let's explore that more deeply and converse with others about it as well. We learn so much more.
Yeah. And it's interesting. When before we pressed record for your listeners, you were talking about your love of stories, Kate. And I can see that in your face, the way you're connected. We're talking over Zoom, just for our listeners. Realize this is radio and podcast, but it enchants us, and it connects us at a gut level, and it builds trust and understanding very quickly. So what I found with these stories is, when people reach out to me about the book, it's very deep, it's very connected. And my hope is that the readers of the book feel connected to these leaders, and they can be partners in their own leadership journeys. The word I've been using for this, and I honor some of the research on this around humble leadership, is personization. It's my new word. It's the idea that you can deeply know someone, that to be a true leader, it's not just a level 1 transaction, which is you and I have trust and you do things for me because you work for me. But level 2, which is we see each other deeply, we connect. And that's what I think what we get in this book around the stories. And because I know you and I know what you stand for and the values you represent, our trust level heightens, which means we can stretch our capacity between the two of us for achievement, for crisis. When crisis happens, one of the words that Megan Rabine uses is the heat experience. So many of your listeners will have remembered something in their professional lives that was very stressful and very intense. And that actually is what creates leadership opportunities and leadership moments. You learn what you're about and what you stand for. And I love that analogy of a heat experience, and that it forges you in some ways into who you are.
Yes. Just like that proverbial image of coal becoming the diamond, right? It's just under pressure and all that heat. Right?
Yeah. And like what you stand for and what you won't tolerate, where your lines are, your boundaries are, where they aren't. And there's a deep knowing. So I believe that feminine, so masculine and feminine energy, masculine, we need both. Masculine energy is get her done. What can we accomplish? Who's on the team? Let's go. And it's very action oriented. We need it. Feminine energy is the much more subtle, beguiling, curiosity, softness, connection, strategy. Where else? What else might be at play? And I believe that the best leaders can access both.
Yes. I'm glad you're saying that. Yes, it is that balance, knowing that both exist and there are different times for each to come forward, and somehow they can blend too, and even be more powerful in that way.
Action without reflection is doing the same thing over and over again, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And yet action with reflection and an opportunity to take stock really is the golden sauce. Any of our corporate leaders are aspiring to that, but you have to have people that are willing to do that self-reflection part. And that's what really leadership is about, is knowing your own blind spots.
Mm-hmm. You said in describing this a little bit ago, humble leadership. That is, I feel, such a powerful term. I haven't heard those two words actually used together. But how are you approaching that?
It's a great question, and it's kind of been this journey of mine to describe the kind of leadership that I'm aspiring to and also looking for in others. And the models we have to date have been quite black and white, quite boxy. Unfortunately, I find our journalism sort of grabs keywords and makes things very black and white because they only have such little amount of time. What I'm talking about is a lot more nuanced. So you either have your top down, some of the other expressions are servant leadership, where the leader serves others. I don't love that because as a woman, I'm very mindful of power dynamics in a room, and I don't ever want to feel, and there's a bit of coercion even in servant leadership, that you're coercing your team to get the most out of them, kind of thing. Partnership or collaborative leadership, I can buy into that, how we build it together. This idea of humble leadership is I want to give credit where it's due. The term is from a book by the Schein, Schein brothers. And the father was was the anchor who built emotional intelligence. Remember that in the 90s?
Yes. Right.
Right.
Okay.
And
yes.
So he and his son have an organization that speaks to the elements of humble leadership. And that word personization is from that book. And what I like about it, what resonates with me, Kate, is that it's not humility, it's humble. So we are always in the service of learning. How cool is that, eh?
Oh, yes.
That we're continually, it really speaks to me around coaching is about curiosity. Coaching is not about fixing. So that's my background, right? People are already whole. People are already sovereign. People are already doing great things. Coaching allows people to develop into who they were meant to be or more of. So this idea of approaching leadership with humbleness, and that what can I learn today? What can I learn from others today? I have a great passion for reverse ageism. And that's the idea that, I might have more chops in the strategic or world life experience, but wow, I am so impressed with my young folks who can oh my God, my daughter with her fingers, she can type on her little phone and flip back and forth. You should see her play Minecraft, Kate. It's like, it's incredible, right? So they have lots to teach us and I have lots to teach them. And together, I think that's what humble leadership bring out the best in people.
Yes. Oh, that's powerful. And within that, you've really struck on the word collaborative, where even speaking about how your daughter is and the younger generations, and yes, the book, taking these 11 other leaders along with yourself, the collaboration to create something that is even greater. I think that we sometimes are losing sight of that. We're often losing sight of that, but it's so key.
Yeah. And I think why collaboration is hard is it takes more time. It takes more skills. It takes consensus building. And it has a longer playing field. You know that expression, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. That's a African proverb. And it really relates. And collaborative leadership has had a bit of a bad rap, right? We tighten down, we clamp down. And when we're really busy, when we sort of define ourselves by our outputs, Kate, when we define ourselves by how much we get done, it's not really an environment for collaboration and curiosity. And so the great companies, the great leaders are making time for this collaboration. And by definition, I mean, there's so much inside this. Psychological safety to me fits right in there. If you don't feel safe enough to voice your opinions, you're not going to get the best out of your team. So I'm always saying to people, we can define them however you want: integrity, psychological safety, workplace, etc. But at the root of it, if we have to see each other as humans of being valued, capable, and responsible for their own actions in order to get the most out of them. If you, Kate, are on my team and you are feeling threatened or out of safety because of the experiences of the people in the room, that's a loss for everybody, because you don't get access to your frontal cortex. When you are stressed, you are not able to access your thinking brain. You're not able to feel comfortable, to play, to brainstorm. So it's a loss for everybody when that happens. And that's where I think collaborative leadership really kind of hands down beats all. It's a collective approach to solving problems, and nobody is wedded to their idea winning.
Right. Yes. We're taking that ego out of it. Not that we can't really appreciate and really believe in who we are, but there's not that ego that seems to just discolor, is my feeling. It kind of warps things.
And the ego has a lens that gets placed in front of what you're hearing. Right? So if I have my ego in place, I listen to what you say through my ego lens of how it affects me. Mm-hmm. So, in coaching, we often talk about you put meaning onto things that happen to you. The action has no meaning. It's kind of like, okay, just jumping for a second, money, Kate, is inert. It has no meaning to it. As humans, we put meaning and influence and inference into money, but it really is just money, right? It's not good or bad or otherwise. It's just a tool. And I think that's a really good analogy that your listeners might be able to understand, that we put meaning onto things. And so be mindful or notice the meanings we're inferring from things, and uncoupling ourselves from the work. Having that perspective. I talk a lot about the Romeo and Juliet balcony with my coaching clients. What do you see if you were to step out of this and move out and look from above? What would you see happening in this environment? And suddenly when you uncouple, it's like, whoa, you have a different perspective.
And that is a really great image for us to hold and to consider in terms of wherever we are, whatever it is that we're doing in our lives. Keep that image in mind, along with remembering that this book, Embracing Ambition, is I'll even call it a tool, because the stories are just so illuminating, give us so much insight and guidance along the way, so that it will help us regardless of what it is our role is. It will help us to be the leader in our own places, right?
And if I've done our work right, it will challenge the reader to try to get out of their comfort zone, right? And to see that they're not alone, to see that the journey is individual but collective. And we really push the envelope on what we talked about. My chapter is about panic attacks, for example. Very interesting to put to paper an experience I had. And then to your point about the word vulnerability, what I want to be clear about is it's not to tell an icky story with drama and clickbait and all that. It was to tell a very difficult story and something I learned from it about myself and about where I'm going. And to me, that learning. And so what was the message in that story was that you cannot try to be someone else. It will always nip you in the bud. And in this case, my body, I'm giving it away. Shucks, Kate. But my body was telling me one thing and my head didn't want to listen. That's the essence of that story. And there's many more like that in the book.
Exactly. And that is, I'm glad you've actually mentioned it in that way, because my feeling with it was how really paying attention to what is going on with us has so many lessons to teach us. It was a critical lesson, both from your own health, physical perspective, as to what it meant in life. We're getting these messages all of the time, so we need to pay attention.
We do need to pay attention. And goodness gracious, for all the women listening, you are already enough. You are already doing enough. You are already generous enough, kind enough, caring enough. And I often say at this point, imagine if you could take all that caring and kindness that you're giving to others and shine it back on yourselves. Oof.
Right. It's like these magical lightning spikes going off. Yes, we do forget to do that. And in your story, then, you show that you did that.
Yeah, I did. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you it was easy. Getting comfortable taking care of yourself when you've been programmed. So there's two parts of programming. There's the programming that you grew up in your house, right? And then there's the programming that society gives us. And so even if you're grown up in the most wonderful home and all sorts of great role models and etc., women, let's just call a spade, because the research says this, it's called the double bind. We have this small box with which we can operate in. Society tells us that if we're too smart, we won't be liked. And if we're too likable, we can't be capable. Does it resonate?
Yeah, yes.
Unfortunately, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing to highlight here, and I want to be clear, is it's got to do with socioeconomic and hierarchical pieces of society. So the top of the the top of the chain is typically patriarchy, just because that's what came first. I always tell people it's just because they got there first. Doesn't mean it's better or worse. It just is. And then, women are down that food chain. But let's talk about our BIPOC people, right? Our folks that don't identify as traditional sexual genders, or folks that are Black, or folks that are of other ethnicities. They get an even smaller box, And so I think it helps me provide some context for this as I choose to lead in my own style, that there's a role for me to play in that. But if I can read stories in this Embracing Ambition book and say, okay, well, this person pushed that envelope there. Well, right. Where could I play? Where could I be curious? Where could I speak up a little bit more? Because when the world doesn't hear your voice, it's a loss for everyone.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. That it's so important to acknowledge that. Yes. And that's what can garner here from Embracing Ambition, the stories, the vulnerability that's expressed, where we might identify a little here, a little there. I mean, from a dozen stories, that's such a broad, important spectrum. So what a gift this is for us. Beyond a gift, I mean, I think it's really an important one of those signal posts along the way to really take us further into what our path is.
I love that. And I my hope is that, Kate, when we looked at the research on is there books like this out there? Because we wanted to know if there was any kind of models. The only one we could find was the Boston Collective. You might remember the book called Our Bodies, Ourselves. Oh, yeah. And it was written by a bunch of women doctors, sort of providing information in one place for women about their bodies, because they didn't feel it was represented enough in the mainstream. And they actually collaboratively wrote it together. And so it's kind of, that was a bit of our model for, if we're going to stand behind this approach for leadership, we better stand behind this approach for how we will build the book. And in less than 1 minute, I will explain the sequence, because it might help your readers understand what that means, because I think we could implement it. Part A is we did some planning calls on Zoom for the 12 women to get to know each other. We met for a weekend to write together. That was sort of a March timeline, and we dove into storytelling. So to your point about your background, really understanding what a good story is. It's not just your experiences put on a piece of paper. It has to have pieces to it. It has to have a crux. It has to have characters, narrative. And what did you learn? And then we had 2 months where we set times on Zoom to help busy people. If you have it in your calendar, you do it. So it was a little bit about refining and editing. We had a very intensive editing process where we worked with an editor, and she would sort of challenge and ask questions. They were all written by the authors, but with tons of help and support, which I think is also what makes the book. It is an interesting read. I don't think there's any soft stories, right? Any weak stories. No. And then finally we launched it and we published it and all that stuff, but we were very vested. And so what's the outcome is I have 12 women that are raving fanatics about the book, which was just another unexpected, really beautiful gift.
Yes. Just so amazing, so important in our lives, and probably I would say today more than ever, and probably tomorrow will be even that much more. It's needed. We need to feel encouraged, supported, and this is where we'll find that, so that we will step up to what our role needs to be at this very important time in our lives. Right? I
love that, Kate, and I appreciate the we can do it through stories, and we can do it through learning. It doesn't have to always be textbooks.
Exactly. Well, there's so much more we could talk about, but that this clock and, radio time just really limits it. But I am so grateful to you, Jenny Mitchell. This has been so wonderful to connect. You're doing such critically important and interesting work in our world. And for people to connect with you, what do you suggest?
So perhaps my website is the easiest place. Okay. You can buy the book on Amazon, just for the record. So Embracing Ambition, if you Google it. My website is chavender.com. That's Chavender like lavender, but with a CH at the beginning, just to spell it. And on there, you can find my podcast, which is called Underdog Leadership. You can find the book. You can find out more about me. And it would be delightful if there's somebody out there that heard this and really resonated with it. I would love to connect. That would just be the cherry on top.
Well, let's you've asked for it. Let's see who responds, and the bounty and all the gifts that are there waiting, so that we can share them with each other. So again, many thanks to you, Jenny Mitchell. This has been so fun, interesting, and I really appreciate who you are and what you're doing in our world.
Well, thank you very much, Kate.
So we wind up this hour of important stories highlighting Women's History Month. Please check this station's website for the podcasts for more information about these guests, and please share the stories with your family and friends. I'm Kate Daniels. If you'd like to connect with me, please just send me an email, katedaniels@hubbardradio.com. Thank you for being here to meet these special women today. Good morning.
Thank you for listening to Inspirational Women. Tune in every Sunday morning at this time to hear about those truly empowering the Northwest community, all for the greater good. Sunday Morning Magazine and Inspirational Women are a public service of Hubbard Radio Seattle.